What's up, Three Creeks? Happy Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever you're watching or listening to this. We're in week 10 of Chasing Wisdom. This is it. This is the last week, and our church planting resident, Trey Gilmore, the guy who's planting Contrast Church in Grandview this fall, he's sharing today's message. And before he does that, I want to tell you a couple things. The first is this: I'm fired up about Serve Gahanna Week. We just did it all week. We served 150 meals every day to families that are in need in our city. I love being a part of a church that wants to serve our city, so thank you for being that church. The second thing is this, that next week on August 16th, I'm imploring you to watch the message. If you know somebody who's kind of been tuned out for a couple weeks, couple months, you got to get them back in, because next week's message sets the course for us as a church for this fall. I don't think there's been a message in the history of our church that's as important as the one that I'm sharing next week. So you've got to tune in and tell somebody else to join you. August 16th, next week, check it out. And listen, if you're a part of the Three Creeks family, or if you're tuning in from anywhere, if you believe in our mission to help people to find and follow God, we want to give you a chance to give financially right now. We want to be a church that you love to give to, because you know that every dollar counts, and every dollar is going towards us fulfilling the mission that God has called us to help people find and follow God. You can give on your computer, on your phone, you can mail a check. All the details are on the screen. We'd love to give you 15 seconds right now to do that before Trey comes and shares a message about friendship.
Oh, hey there. My name is Trey Gilmore, and I'm the church planting resident of Three Creeks for just one more month. I don't know if you saw, but this is regulation size, so kind of impressive. But the reason I'm here is because I want to talk a little bit about basketball. Maybe you're a basketball fan, maybe you're not, but you've probably heard of the school, UCLA. Now, they're not maybe the most powerhouse school right now, but back in the 60s, they were the best. In fact, from 63 to 75, they won 10 national championships. 7 of those were in a row. It was ridiculous. In fact, there's no other team that's won more than 4, and they won 7 in a row. So, phenomenal team. And they were led by a guy named John Wooden, Coach Wooden, maybe you've heard of. And a lot of sports analysts, well, they speculate, like, what made the UCLA Bruins so good? What made them unstoppable? And a lot of times, you can look at maybe their offense and their strategy, which was a lot of what people would say was they had an unstoppable offensive strategy that couldn't be stopped. But I think a lot of the kind of the sub-layers of what made them so good was Coach Wooden's ability to create a team chemistry. A team chemistry that had these guys so well knit together that they were just an unstoppable force. And if you're not familiar with team chemistry, you can think a little bit like real chemistry, like Bunsen burners and moles, whatever those are, in the periodic table of elements and all those things. But the idea that basically the chemistry is studying the things that go together, the elements of things that work together. In the same way, sports talks about this thing called team chemistry. And in a lot of different sports, it's talked about, but it's hard to kind of gauge. There's no level of gauging how much team chemistry is proven, but you're able to see it based on their performance. For instance, if I was going to shoot a hoop here, and I was playing 2-on-2 with some other people, team chemistry would be my partner and I's ability to almost subconsciously know where we might go, where if I'm going to go get a rebound, they might know where they need to be opposite of where I am. And it's this ability to kind of move as one unit. It's really just being unified. And I think that's what made the UCLA Bruins so good. And I kind of want to talk about that same idea today with our lives and our relationships. I think that people, more often than not, are actually shaped by the people that we're around. We can see this in tons of different ways. One of the most obvious ways is fashion. You might think, I'll never wear something like that. And then a few years later, all of a sudden, you're wearing exactly what you thought you wouldn't wear. Or you get a time hop on your social media and you see yourself 5 years ago and you were wondering why you ever bought cargo pants. cargo shorts or pants in the first place. You're like, what was I thinking? If you're still wearing cargo shorts, maybe they're coming back into style, I don't know. But regardless to say, you never thought you'd do it, and then all of a sudden you did. You were basically informed by the people around you, and it affected your decision. And what really made me think of this was recently I saw this TikTok, and now it was on Facebook. So this TikTok on Facebook, where this guy was basically saying that if you're around 5 confident people, that you'll be the 6th confident person. If you're around 5 intelligent people, you'll be the 6th. If you're around 5 millionaires, you'll be the 6th. But he also said if you're around 5 idiots, you'll be the 6th. And my mentor shared this, and he wrote, if you're around 5 godly people, that you'll be the 6th. And really that idea is just showing you the people around you can shape you. They can inform your habits, the things that you like, the things that you do. And that aspect is so true in all of our lives. There's kind of maybe a philosophical debate on what are we shaped by and how are we shaped, but I think we would all agree that no matter what, we're being shaped by something. Whether it's good or bad, we are being shaped. And relationships have a huge ability to affect that. In fact, there's a wise proverb by a man named Solomon who says this: walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. That's Proverbs 13:20. Now, Proverbs was written by Solomon and a few other people, and the main goal of this was essentially that they were the parent writing to their child. It was as if they had these little tidbits of wisdom that they wanted to sink into your heart and be something that you'd never forget. And they're around a lot of different issues. In fact, this is our last week of Chasing Wisdom, and we've covered a ton of fun topics that are all relevant in our life. And so today, we want to talk about friendship. We want to talk about companionship. And maybe the bigger group would be considered just community, is basically the people around me, the relationships that are life-giving to me. And in this, we know simply that if we walk with wise people, we'll become wise. But if we associate with fools, that we will be in trouble. In fact, another one says that we'll watch pieces of our lives fall apart. And I think that's so interesting because when we think about relationships and maybe what has formed us, those relationships have been, I think, the catalyst for our growth. They've been the things that we've been able to see have been formative in our life. For me, I know that in college, one of the most formative things for me was when I got there, I was surrounded by a lot of these godly dudes that I felt like were just spiritual juggernauts. They were these guys who I'd never seen pray like this before, or read the Bible like this. They were just passionate about the Lord. And it was just shocking. And to me, I think it ultimately led to a huge opportunity for me to grow spiritually and to be just in better community. And so I know that this verse rings true in my life. In fact, I know that these little tidbits of wisdom, though they might seem cheesy or like tweetable or they're too simple, actually have a lot of immense depth to them. And so today all I want to do is I just want to talk about 3 different aspects of friendship, 3 key things that I think what really makes a great friend and for you to be a good friend. It's no surprise that a lot of us might say, yeah, we have friends, or maybe you're like, I have 1,000 Facebook friends. But when you really start to think about it, do you really have the friends that are really involved in your life, that know you deeply, that can push you to be better? And so today I want to give you kind of 3 opportunities that I think friendship really is powerfully laced into. And the first one is this. The first one's simply this: that friendship is always loving first. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, "Those who love their dream of community will destroy it, but those who genuinely love those around them will find community." Likewise, Proverbs 17:17 says, "Friends always show their love." In fact, what are brothers and sisters for if not to share troubles? Now, I know we think about these verses and I realize, wow, that's actually not the easiest thing to think about. In fact, when I think about it, maybe you've had experiences with people who have really just betrayed your trust. Maybe you've had some sort of trauma or abuse or something where when you think about friendships, you're like, yeah, I kind of tried that and I got burnt by it. Or I had instances where I feel like I was just pouring myself out for people and for some reason I wasn't getting any reciprocation. And I know that's hard, and I know in relationships a lot of time it's really difficult. In fact, I think we've all had those moments where we've realized friendship is actually really hard, and a lot of times it's not what we thought it would be. And I love that quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, because I think a lot of times we want it to be something, and instead of just loving the people around us, we have this expectation of what we think it ought to be or what this person ought to give to me. And I want to be honest with us that that's not the right mentality to have in a friendship. If we're called to emulate Jesus in the way that he loved people, his ministry was a ministry of reconciliation, that no matter what the other party gave to us, that we continue to love them first and foremost, no matter what. A good example of that is John 15. John 15 is this story where Jesus communicates his relationship to people and to the disciples through this illustration of a vine. But then at the end of that, he basically says, you guys are my friends. He calls them actually friends, is the word, and he communicates this relationship of them. But what's interesting then is when you fast forward later to the story and you fast forward to Luke 22, which is kind of towards the end, he's at this place called the upper room where they're having the Last Supper. And what we often forget is that he was having this last day on earth, and he knew that this was his last day. He decides, I'm going to wash the feet of my disciples, and I'm also going to eat dinner with them. But what's also really interesting that we typically forget is that Judas, the one who betrays him, is there the entire time. The entire time that Jesus washed his feet, that Jesus fed him a meal, that Jesus communed with these people, knowing that Judas was going to betray him. So for us, we have to realize that Judas ate too. That I actually saw a really cool tattoo that someone put on their arm, and it just said Judas ate too. And I love that idea that we realize that Jesus' love for us is always first and foremost not dependent on anything we do or who we are, but that he's just self-giving love. That's who he is. And so we're called to emulate that in the same way, even with friendships, even with relationships. And we have to realize that we're actually Judas too in a lot of ways, that we've betrayed Jesus, that we're sinful, that we in no way deserve a seat at the table. And if I asked you right now, if you had one day left in your life, who would you invite to dinner? You're not going to invite the people you know are going to betray you or have betrayed you or have caused problems in your life. You're going to invite the people that are most harmonized with you, that you typically have the easiest or maybe most fun time with. You're like, this is my last day, I'm going to do it. But we know that Jesus knew that, and he chose to eat with Judas still. So in the same way, we have to know that friendship is always loving first, that it doesn't matter the experiences that we've had, that it doesn't matter what our idea, our expectation of friendship is, that first and foremost, we love first. Number 2, friendship is being all in. Being all in. I'm talking 100% in, no doubts about it. One of the best relationships to compare this to in the Bible is David and Jonathan. Maybe you've heard of David and Jonathan. They're a pretty classic story. Their friendship was intense, like covenant intense, emotionally vulnerable. I mean, it was pretty intense. You're like, wow, these guys are really friends. But what I love about the relationship more than anything is actually the start of their relationship. In 1 Samuel, there's a story where we get a depiction of Jonathan and this kind of all-in guy that he is. It's crazy. They're fighting against the Philistines, and his dad, Saul, who was the king at the time, they were fighting them, and Jonathan decides, without telling his dad, that he's going to go and he's going to kill some of these Philistines. They're evil people, they're wicked, and he wants to get rid of them. And so he decides, I'm going to go attack this garrison of Philistine soldiers. And so it's at night, he's sitting on this rock, and he's looking over this ravine, and there's a camp of them, and those are big dudes. There's a camp of them, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to go attack them, and if the Lord's with me, the Lord's with me, or not. And he tells his armor bearer this, and armor bearer at the time was people who carried your armor. It was extremely heavy, and they were kind of like carrying the banner of your flag, right? They were your assistant, if you will. Not a very big person, not really trained to fight, but they were an armor bearer. And so he tells his armor bearer this, and what does his armor bearer say? He says, you know what? This guy is like confident. I'm going to follow this confidence. And so they both go into this battle at night, going to go try to kill these Philistines, just the two of them, this Jonathan and this little squirmy guy. And what's crazy about it is as they're going up to the camp, Jonathan decides I don't know if he thinks it's too easy or he just wants to show the God's glory. So he announces that they're coming. He doesn't even sneak up on him. He says, hey, y'all, I'm coming. Get ready. He starts talking some trash, right? And then he runs up there, and sure enough, he kills 20 Philistines, the whole camp, him and his armor bearer, 20 Philistines. This guy is like intense. Like, I don't know what you would think, why you would do that, but he does it. Now, fast forward a little bit later. Maybe you've heard the story of David killing Goliath with the sling and the rock. It's a crazy story. Well, this is how the relationship starts. David is told by Saul to basically kind of share his story, to talk about God's glory and all of this. And David the whole time reveals his story, and it says this in 2 Samuel. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. That verse, 1 Samuel 18:1, really encapsulates, I think, why they were attracted to each other. They were attracted to each other because here Jonathan he's an all-in guy, doesn't mess around. David, an all-in guy, doesn't mess around. And because of that, they find this relationship that becomes so intense and so powerful in their lives. And I really think it's because both of them were all in. They trusted each other. They knew they had integrity. They knew that they had each other's back. They had seen their track record. And so they become friends and they have this awesome relationship. And I know that maybe being all in is kind of obvious, right? You're like, well, of course, I should be all in all my relationships. But if I was to ask you, do you have those people in your life right now? I think a lot of us would say, no, I don't think I do. I think about the person who just left college and is kind of having this culture shock. Like, I had all these friends. I was living in a house with 12 people, and now I'm out in my 1-bedroom apartment or my 2-bedroom apartment. I'm not really that great friends with my roommate, and you just don't have these people that you can maybe call with a flat tire at 2 a.m. or that you're sick and they can take you to the hospital or drive you back, or all these different things, right? Or maybe you're the person who just got married and you're trying to figure out what it's like to have married friends, because sometimes married friends, the two of you don't always click with the two of the other ones. Sometimes your wife might click with someone or vice versa, and you're trying to figure out what it's like to have married friends. Or maybe you have kids now and you're realizing, I have literally no time at all. Like, I can't have time for another relationship. I can't foster and communicate, like weekly or daily or monthly or whatever it is with a relationship. But then you sit back and you think like, wow, I really have no one in my life other than maybe my family. Some of you maybe don't even have that in my life that is all in, that I'm all in for, that I know that when life gets tough, that things hit the fan, or even when you want to celebrate, when you want to have a party, when you want to rejoice, that you just have a hard time thinking of that person. And so I think being all in is actually something that we need to remember, because a lot of us don't have that person. And if we go back to the first point, love or friendship is always loving first. Realize that actually is the catalyst for starting these relationships, that we don't just expect people to show up on our doorstep to be like, I want to be your best friend ever. But like Jonathan and David, we see David's track record and we realize, wow, I want to be friends with that because of Jonathan's all-in ability. So number 2, friendship is being all in. Our last one, number 3, is friendship is being honest and speaking truth in others' lives. That might not be the one that you were really thinking of, and it might cause a bit of like a tense reaction. So I'll sit down for this because I think it might require that. But a lot of times in our relationships, in our friendships, and even in our culture today, we're kind of being indoctrinated into this idea that friendships are truly only based upon the harmony of our relationship, that there should be no rifts, there should be no difficulties or any tensions that we might feel, that it should be as easy and feel good as possible in our friendship. But the Bible actually kind of disagrees with that. In fact, Proverbs 24:26 says this: an honest answer is like a kiss of friendship. Proverbs 27:6 says, wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. See, in our Western world today, like I said earlier, there's this kind of culture that we're being indoctrinated to, really without even knowing it, that friendship and relationships should all be pursuing only happiness, that if there's any rifts or any tensions or any problems, that we just need to let people be themselves, that independence is key, that their truth is their truth, and that we don't have the ability or the right to speak into it. And I kind of want to bluntly call that out. I actually think that's completely wrong. That Proverbs here speaks to this idea that, like I said, it's the wound from a friend is far better than the kisses from an enemy. That affirmation that we might get about the things that are really not good for us, that are really killing us, is not even worth the tension that we might have in a relationship if they're pursuing good, that they're pursuing the betterment of our lives, of us being more in love with Jesus. And that's the truth of friendships. And in fact, we might think, well, but I need people to affirm me. And there's nothing against affirmation and encouraging people in what they're doing, but we got to think about, what is this doing to our lives? How is this affecting the way that we see the Lord, that we do ministry? And I think that it's kind of like this atrophy of us following Jesus in a way that I believe he would call us to, that he's calling us to love him more, to grow spiritually, to be able to navigate difficult conversations and conflicts. And I think a lot of times we just think that the real friends in our lives are the ones who we don't have that with. That's actually not true. Actually, when I do premarital counseling, one of the things that I kind of bring up is that conflict is extremely natural and should be natural and normal in marriage. That the people who don't argue, that don't have conflict, actually most likely have strain in their marriage, because what's happening is they're hiding things, or they're resenting, and they're stuffing, and they're numbing, and that's not actually the pathway to a flourishing intimate marriage. That you actually have to navigate through those conflicts. And in the same way, I think friendships are no different. That if you have a friend who you've never gotten in an argument with, I really don't think they're a great friend, because a good friend knows that you're a sinner, they know they're a sinner, and they're going to call you on your stuff. They're going to help you see your blind spots that we all have. They're going to help you see your brokenness and push you to love Jesus more. They're going to push you to your Bible. They're going to push you into deeper humility, and that's the relationship they have. David and Jonathan had that. They had opportunities where they were, kind of the discerning wisdom for each other, and they helped each other be better. And I think this quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer is probably the most helpful in this. He says this, he says, "Nothing can be more cruel than the leniency which abandons others to their sin. Nothing can be more compassionate than the severe reprimand which calls another Christian in one's community back from the path of sin." I love this quote by Dietrich, because I feel like in some ways we never look at the word severe reprimand and think that's a positive thing, but he actually says, no, it's actually compassionate. And what I also love about him quoting this is that he experienced that he was in radical community, that he knew what it meant to cultivate a life-giving community and friendships and relationships that were just rooted in self-giving love because of Jesus, by far. If you read his book, Life Together, it'll outline that. It's a phenomenal read. But this idea of severe reprimand actually needs to go both ways, though. In fact, being a good friend is not only just speaking the truth in others' lives, but it's also being able to receive it. That in the process of our relationship, that being a good friend isn't just saying, hey, you know what, you really screwed up there, you need to do what you need to do to fix that, but or repent or whatever it may be, but also that you should be able to receive that as well, and that you hope that you have good friends who will tell you that. And it's unique in my life like that, because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so that means challenger, and most people think I just love getting in arguments and conflict, and sometimes maybe I do, or I'm easily tricked into it. But most of the time, I don't love it, but I value it, because I know that it has immense weight in our lives, that if we don't have people who are speaking truth into our life, that are maybe reprimanding us of sin that's going unseen or unnoticed, that maybe it's a blind spot in my life, or maybe I'm just being prideful, and it's maybe hard to calculate exactly what that looks like, but someone else on another level can see that we are able to see that. And so I value that. And one of the instances in my life that I've seen it be remarkable is studying church history. There's actually this group called the Holy Club. They didn't actually call themselves that. People who were looking at a distance kind of judged them, and they called them the Holy Club. But they were essentially like the original small group. If you think about small groups today, I'd say this is one of the first ones that was modeling small group ideals. And it was started by a guy, the first guy, his name was Charles Wesley. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's written over 6,000 hymns, preached all over Europe. And in fact, many of his hymns now you probably still sing today, whether it's at a traditional church, or modern churches tend to redo them or steal parts of it and put it in another song. You've probably sung some of his hymns. And so he started it, and then his brother, John Wesley, who maybe you've heard of, became the leader of the group. And John Wesley is the father of the Methodism denomination, as well as roots in the Wesleyan denomination, that he kind of formed these systems and this beautiful understanding of God. And he was insane. I mean, if you read his daily itinerary, if he had a Google Calendar and you could take a glimpse at it, you'd be shocked. In fact, it's said that he traveled thousands of miles, 230,000 miles on horseback, preaching the gospel. I don't know if you can do math on that, but that's a lot of miles on a horse. In fact, sometimes they would say he would write sermons while on horseback, while riding. So I don't know if you've ever maybe written stuff on your MacBook on a plane, but I imagine writing notes on a horseback is way more impressive. And in that, he preached 40,000 times over his career, is what they estimate. 40,000 times. That's so much. They say that he also gave up to 30,000 pounds over his lifetime, which would, equivocate to around $30,000. And at that time, that's insane. That's a lot of money. And so this guy was just insane, just Awesome. And then another guy who's pretty well known and is said to be one of the greatest preachers in the 18th century is George Whitefield. He's like this classic staple of preaching. His stats are astounding. In fact, people would say that he could preach just a few sentences and people would start weeping, which is just crazy to even think about. But he was just this spiritual juggernaut that would preach and thousands came to Christ. It's estimated that he preached 18,000 times, around 18,000 times, to 10 million people, 10 million hearers. And these three guys were all in the same group. There are some other guys who also have incredible accolades that I'm not going to mention, but you think this is just happens to be in common, that they all happen to be in the same small group? I don't think so. I think the reason why these guys were so stellar is because in the midst of this group, they were able to be insane friends, insane companions, love each other well, and I think practice these three principles. In fact, we know that if you read a lot of the books on John Wesley and you read some of the stuff on George Whitefield, these two guys actually disagreed on tons of theological issues. They were almost as polar opposite as you could get theologically. But we know that they were in this group for a long period of time. They pushed each other to get better. At the end of their lives, they both had great things to say about each other. And I just think what a life-giving relationship, that we can have these big theological differences, that we can have these big areas of our lives in the way that we were raised, the parents we had, the life we're living now, the income that we make. And in that, we can still find a way to love each other well. I think that's such a beautiful thing, and I think the Holy Club is the model of that. So number one, friendship is always loving first. That Jesus did it with his disciples and even Judas by being a good friend first. Number two, friendship is being all in. David and Jonathan did it by having an all-in commitment. And number three, the last one is, friendship is being honest and speaking truth into others' lives. The Holy Club modeled that, and that was truly what I think helped them become incredible godly men and have the ability to make a huge difference in the world and to grow as a follower of Jesus. Now, I know you can package that all up in a pretty little bow, but I want to add one final caveat. We know that in the proverb it said that those who are with the wise become wise, but it also said that if you associate with fools, that you'll become a fool, that it can be bad. And I want to add a caveat to that. I don't want you to think that that you just need to immediately run from all non-Christian relationships, that if there's toxic people in your life, that you just have to immediately cut them off and sever ties and only have church people in your life. I actually think that's a huge danger as well. If we look at the life of Jesus, that his rhythms were incredibly purposeful. Not necessarily just what he said, but the rhythms of his life, the hours that he spent, the ways and places that he went. He spent time with people who would be considered social outcasts to the point where just associating with them could ruin your reputation. In fact, people claim that he could be a drunkard or a glutton because he was hanging out with the tax collectors and the sinners, as they were called. But he also didn't spend 24/7 with those people. He spent a lot of time in prayer. He spent an immense amount of time in his relationship with the Father, because that was the recharging, that was the foundation, the stability of his ability to go and to be a light to those people. So I don't want you to think that that I'm telling you in the midst of this that you should just abandon all people who aren't building you up, who aren't maybe making you better, or aren't giving you things that you think you need. Because like I said, community isn't about what you think it is. It's about loving those around you. But I also think you should be able to give an honest assessment of yourself and say, are there relationships in my life right now that are affecting me, that I'm around these people that are sucking the life out of me, that when I'm around them, I say things I shouldn't, or I drink too much, or I am pursuing vanity, or I'm gossip or slandering. Am I doing that on a consistent basis? Is it not bettering my ability to love Jesus more, to love others more? And so in that, I think we need to be able to discern, and I would encourage you to read the Gospels, to read Jesus' rhythms and to emulate those. That he had friends that were disciples, that he had people that he could be around that would love him, that he would love them, and he would always love them first. But he also had the ability to have a purposeful ministry that was filled with the fools, that was able to permeate their lives and make a difference for them. And so I'd encourage you that in friendship, to evaluate these three things, to love first, to be all in, and to speak truth in people's lives, because that's truly what will help not only you become better, but the people around you as well.
Thanks for tuning in. Hey, don't forget there's always a part 2. This week it's an interview with a friend of mine named Nick Nye. He talks about friendship, how important it is. Remember, friendship is always loving first. It's being all in. It's being honest and speaking truth. And I want to urge you, Three Creeks, don't just go and look for good friends, but go and be a good friend. God gave us friends. What a gift. I hope you'll go be a great friend today. Don't forget, next week, August 16th, it's the Sunday this summer that you cannot miss. We'll see you then.